Welcome to MyACT, live from Cannes Lions. My name is Thomas from Goodvertising, and I am joined by Sophie, co-founder of ACT.
Hi, Thomas.
So lovely
to see you today.
So lovely to be back. We had an amazing open house for Good yesterday, and for those of you who watched that, we did have a bit of a surprise guest, didn't we?
Yes, Jimmy
Fallon. Just as we were about to cut the right ribbon, Fallon had been in the DBC. After having done his talk, he decided to gate crash that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
It was great. It was fun.
A good support from Jimmy, obviously caring about, I guess, a lot of different issues. So that's good. But today we have to zoom in on an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, state of our nature. And unless you have been living underneath a rock, it's not going very well. Probably you didn't know, but I grew up on a very small island in the middle of the Baltic Sea called Bornholm. When I was a kid, I used to run around the rocks, catch fish with my hands. Today, the Baltic Sea is dead. The fishermen that I used to go to school with have no jobs. The boats have gone. So nature is obviously connected with communities, living, economic incentives in small islands as Bornholm. So that is some of the topics we're going to dive into and trying to understand how can creativity create solutions to local issues, solutions to systemic issues. So I'm very, very happy to be joined by some excellent people who have some excellent creative solutions to some of this stuff. So we're going to do a little bit of a round the table presentation of these lovely people. So we're going to start with you, İlkay, all the way from Turkey.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Could you tell us your name and your title?
İlkay. I'm İlkay Gürpınar from TBWA Istanbul. I'm the Chief Creative Officer. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Pieter. I'm a creative director. I'm currently working in New York, but I'm representing the people from FCB France here.
Thank you, Pieter, for coming and speaking here.
Thank you.
Sherri?
Yes, hello, my name is Sherri Aldis. I'm the director of what we call the UN Regional Information Center for Western Europe. So I look after UN communications for about 22 countries in Western Europe.
Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Michael Kaliski. I'm the founder of Good Planet Innovation, which is a social impact and sustainability agency, as well as co-founder of Green the Bid, which is a nonprofit we established to specifically help create resources and community around sustainability for the advertising industry.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
So we'll launch the talk with you, İlkay, and to begin with, we're going to see your wonderful campaign.
Eskiden geçimimizi denizden sağlardık. Kılıç balıkları vardı, uskumrular vardı, kolyos balıkları vardı, kalkan balıkları vardı. Şimdi azaldı. Şimdi azaldı.
Ocaklar, balıkçılıkla geçinen bir köy. Balıkçılık ölürse ocaklar yaşar mı?
İyi bakmamışız denizlerimize. Bizden sonraki gelecek nesillere ne bırakacağız bilmiyorum.
O köyde geçinecek bir şey kalmadığında kimse kalır mı? Kimsenin yaşamadığı bir yerin hayalet bir köyden farkı kalır mı?
Ne yapabiliriz ki burada? Her şey daha çok zorlaşıyor balıkçılıkta.
Bu manzara doğru balıkçılık yapılmazsa yaşanacak yarınları simgeliyor. Denizlerin dibinde kalan ağlar balıkları avlamaya devam ediyor ve yaşam alanlarını tehdit ediyor. Balıkçılığı tehdit eden bu ağlar hayalet ağlar.
O hayalet ağlar orada kaldığı sürece balık avlamaya devam etmekte.
Carrefour'sa olarak balıkçılıkla sürdürülebilir bir ekonomi için hala şans var dedik. Balıkçılık yaşarsa ocaklar yaşar dedik. Ocaklardaki hayalet ağları tek tek topladık. Toplanan hayalet ağlarla Ocaklar Köyü'nü bir gecede hayalet köye çevirdik. Doğru avlanmaya dikkat çektik. Dikkat çekmekle kalmadık. Ocaklarda sürdürülebilir bir ekonomi oluşması için adımlar attık. Bölgede doğru balıkçılık eğitimleri veriyor, bu eğitimleri dijital platformlarla tüm Türkiye'ye yayıyor, balıkçılığın ekonomiye katkı sağlamasını devam ettirmek için çalışıyoruz.
Marmara Denizi'nde kurulan midye çiftlikleri denizi temizliyor. Çünkü midye suyu süzerek beslenen bir canlı.
Aynı zamanda Ocaklar'da bulunan Türkiye'nin ilk entegre midye tesisiyle işbirliği yapıyor, onlarca aileye geçim imkanı sağlıyoruz.
Şimdi kendi paramı da kazanıyorum, aile bütçesine de katkım oluyor.
Doğru balıkçılıkla temiz tuttuğumuz denizler sayesinde tüketicilerin de güvenli ve sağlıklı midyeye erişmesini sağlıyoruz. Çünkü balıkçılık yaşarsa, Ocaklar yaşar.
So bravo, it does resonate with your story, right?
It absolutely does. I went to school with some of those kids who used to live in the biggest house on the road and suddenly having more or less no house, family bankrupt, the bank's bankrupt. So it's
Something you
story
relate.
that touched
Same
me
story.
from my childhood.
Same story.
Yeah.
So now, İlkay, what was the idea and how do you made it resonate all over the place?
So to start with, it's for the project is for Carrefour'sa, the leading supermarket chain in Turkey, and they have been talking about fresh fish for such a long time. So when you go to the supermarket, you see this beautiful rack of fresh fish coming from coastal towns every day. But there is a problem that threatens these small coastal towns. 80% of the fish is coming from them, but the problem is fish nets left under the sea keep on fishing fish, thus kill the living habitat. And nobody's talking about this, nobody knows this, and they're called ghost nets. So what we did is we went to this small coastal town, the fisherman town, which has been losing its livelihood for a while, and we collected all that fish net, the ghost nets from under the sea, 4 tons of ghost nets from under the sea, and we covered the whole town of Ocaklar and turned it into a ghost town. The next day we invited the whole media from Turkey and abroad, and that's how the conversation started.
Oh, that's great. And so once the conversation started, how do you ensure that it continues, and how do you think creativity can help?
Yeah, I think there are 2 reasons for that. First, and what I'm going to say is relevant to all advertising cases. When you give a new information to the world, when you let people know about something, if the work involves a new info, I think it resonates better. People tend to learn faster, people tend to pick it up, and people tend to tell friends, did you notice there are ghost nets left under the sea? So there is a new information in this piece of work which the world didn't know much about. I think that was one of the reasons why people wanted to share it. Human nature, you want to show you're knowledgeable, and the second thing is that the visuality, I think, shocked people. There was a lot of conversation if it's AI or not. Oh my God, is it AI? No, they really did it. So the power of visuals in today's advertising world is so important, I think, and that was one of the other reasons why it was super famous very quickly.
Yes, exactly. I think, they saw it. They saw. When I saw it first, I didn't get the whole thing. I thought it was beautiful. It was this ghost town was chilling, and then I went into and I tried to understand because it was, I had to read it, what was going on. I wanted to understand, and it's true. The power of seeing something, so striking, does, begin a conversation.
Yeah, and it's almost the point about novelty, I think, is great. I think there's so many campaigns where our industry hasn't been educated enough, so we tend to go more with a tokenistic approach, talk about the things that are just sort of maybe not actually really making that much of an impact. And I think actually last week, I believe, we did actually have the UN Ocean Summit here, where one of the key things was bottom trawling of the sea and the damage that it does to the seabed. So one thing is obviously damaging oceans. Another thing is how do we restore oceans? And I think in general in sustainability we see this shift from talking more about, the damage, the pollution, to actually see how can we regenerate, how can we actually do what nature does really, really well. It does regenerate in many, many aspects by itself. And so I know, Pieter, that you have made a tremendous piece of work in that. I was lucky to judge it at DNAD Impact a couple of months ago, a couple of weeks ago, I think it actually was. Should we just watch the campaign Rock Seeds?
Des flammes rougeoyantes.
It's chaos, really. You hear
While the eyes of the entire world are fixed on forest fires, another type of forest is being destroyed at a massive rate. Kelp forests, the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world. They absorb twice as much CO2 as rainforests, but due to climate change, most of what remains are lifeless rocks. What if we could use these rocks as a tool for reforestation? TBS, in association with One Ocean, supported by UNESCO, presents Rock Seeds, turning dead rocks into living kelps.
We created an innovative technique that transforms the rocks that were left in the seabed into seeds that grow new kelp trees. Young kelp plants are so vulnerable, they can't start growing amid rising ocean temperatures. But as they mature, they grow strength to survive.
So we skipped that vulnerable phase by growing them in a protected environment.
We developed a carving pattern on ocean rocks for the rootless kelp to attach itself and grow in the way it needs. We turned thousands of ordinary stones into little homes for kelps to flourish.
Then we place our rocks laden with kelp in an aquaculture basin to ensure they're fully ready to return to the ocean.
At TBS, our clothing design has taken inspiration from the sea since 1978. It was time to give something back. We launched at 3 damaged locations with multiple cameras to monitor progress. We created a live stream website for people to get involved. The project expanded globally. And we drove action with our strategically placed campaign.
Rock Seeds. Rock Seeds are really important.
Rock Seeds is a scientific breakthrough that tackles climate change and offers a step forward for future generations.
I really do think this is an excellent example of how we as a creative industry can come up with exciting solutions and also tell novel stories and new stories of hope in a time that is very much in a state of doom and gloom. So well done, Pieter, and I'm crossing my fingers it's going to do very well at Cannes. I think it did quite well at DNAD. We're obviously here also to share knowledge, and for other agencies looking at this, how can they sort of approach the sort of thinking that you applied in terms of understanding these ecological challenges?
Yeah, first of all, I don't want to take all the credit for this. There's a lot of people who worked on this. I think the real what made this project really well was the partnership between the agency, the brand, and the actual scientists doing it, because all these 3 parties really connected well and actually knew what they were doing. And that's how this solution came to be. Otherwise, I don't think this would be possible that just a creative sitting in a room can come up with this. You need to understand what the scientists like, because the brand already had a partnership with the science team. So you can't come up with this in a vacuum. I think it's through collaboration and trying to understand each other that the team came up with this. The brand also had a very long-standing partnership with the science team, which also made a big difference. I think when a brand does something like this, they need to have some level of authority to talk about this. There's not just that it doesn't come just out of nowhere. For example, if the supply chain of a brand has massive problems, I don't think like doing something about sustainability is like appropriate. So this brand had been involved in a lot of initiatives around the oceans, so it was a natural link. We really loved it because there's a certain poetry in having a dead rock and still being able to being a foundation for new life. So it was a very striking visual to see this dead rock and seeing something grow out of it. I think it's a message of hope, and I think, yeah, we live in cynical times often. I think we need a little bit of hope, and we need to dare to be hopeful again. I think that's exactly what it is, because all too often you're seen as a little bit delusional or naive when you want to save the world. But I think it's exactly that state of mind that we have to dare to embrace again.
It's almost like, Pieter, that collaboration has definitely been one of the sort of key themes that we've heard in the MyACT conversations, and also in the Palais, and so it's good to sort of emphasize that, because I think our industry has strong competences, but really sort of applying more like a cross-disciplinary approach really seems to be hammering home this case and the success of this case. But it's not all agencies who necessarily sort of understand collaboration, how you can drive that sort of long-term collaboration for nature. So do you have any advice to agencies or brands or non-profits, for that sake, who wants to sort of mimic or
I think as an agency you need access to the kitchen from the brand. Like, you need to like fully understand what are their sustainable initiatives, what are their weaknesses, like, because no brand is perfect, just like no person is perfect. So you need to fully understand what are they doing well, what are they doing wrong. So when you come up with something, that it's rooted in truth and not that it doesn't feel out of place for that particular brand. So I think, yeah, you need to really look what the brand is doing, what they could do better, and create on that. Otherwise, you might create something that's out of place for that specific client, I think.
I love that. Sustainability is a journey, and let's not make perfection the enemy of moving forward. So very well said, Pieter.
And I think it's very important to the collaboration. The collaboration for me is the key point, because you can't do things if you don't, because you're all good in one sector, in your sector, and you have your own. You can't become an NGO if you're a brand. You're a brand. Actually, an NGO is a brand. So a commercial brand. You can't. So it's very important that every person around the table has its own expertise, and it's the getting the expertise of all these people that together that will move forward on our subject, because these subjects are essential. And I'm going to turn to you, Michael, because coming to this, there's a whole other part. You have an expertise in production, so and this comes into the mix. So let's talk about what you do and what's your expertise.
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point about perfection being the enemy of the good. So being we'd rather have billions of imperfect environmentalists than a handful of perfect ones. But it does take a village. Really, when you're approaching a project, you have to think in terms of keeping the end in mind and approach it with intention to do well, with integrity to follow through. But this has to be communicated from the top. And so, like one of the things we created, Green the Bid, to include all the stakeholders. Because prior, production companies were afraid to put it in because they thought if their budget was 1% higher, they might be, they might lose the bid. And then agencies didn't want to rock the boat necessarily, and brands were focused on supply chain and operations and not really thinking in terms of marketing. But once we created this framework where there's a pledge where production companies are encouraged to have the courage to put it in their bids, and agencies, their pledge is to advocate, both in terms of encouraging production companies to do it by putting it into the specs, and then the talking and educating the brands about it. And the brand's pledge is to pay a reasonable amount, and we have a lot of information about what that range is. And it does cost a little bit to be sustainable, but it's a very small amount, because by the time you pay something, which is not very much anyway, you're saving also with reducing waste. You know, like if you're donating the art department to schools and theater companies, you're not paying to throw it away. You know, if you're composting your food scraps or donating the food scraps, you reduce waste that way. Also, a green set is a happy set. You know, we notice that everybody's like kind of got a little more bounce in their step when there's a really strong process. But I'll say the other way to look at this is what we call regenerative storytelling. So looking at the creative itself, and it could be campaigns that are specifically like the ones that you guys did, but also just if you're just doing a scene and there's like a party in a backyard, hipster party, you know, let's put some plants on the grill instead of ribs. Let's get rid of the single-use plastic in all things on screen. Because, you know, 6 billion people in the world watch movies and TV shows and media content, even more watch advertising. And so if we can elevate the behavior and all the things that people are watching, it'll elevate the behavior of our global population.
Yes, and you need people that knows, you know, see, oh, this, you can't have that here, because sometimes you don't know. You just don't know. You put it in and you just don't know. It shouldn't be there because you've used to have a plastic cup or a bottle or, you know, so you need, you know, people that have the eye and the knowledge to tell you, okay, this you can do, this you can't do. So now, what are your biggest barriers to scaling up?
Well, I mean, it would. I think it's education and a fear of being imperfect. I think also. There's a tendency sometimes as there's not a strong enough urgency in messaging from the client or the brand or the agency down to the production teams, and so they'll do like a surface thing. They'll like, oh, we got rid of single-use plastics and we have recycling bins, so we're green, you know, and some that's part education, part like we don't have to spend money on it because we can do this really cheap, and then they don't really do a great job, you know. So I think that's it's a lot of that. And I wanted to make a point also about AI because we've been talking about that a lot this week. And we know that AI has a very big impact on energy and water. And I think that it will be important for us to figure out, because it's not going to people aren't just going to not use it, right? But we should have a framework for discouraging frivolous use, but also having a calculation for if a job was going to take 2 months by a team, and you can do it in a day or 2 days by using AI methods, then there's a balancing. We don't know what that number is yet. So that I think it would be a really important white paper to do. We might do it, and then also, but I like this idea I just had while I was in Cannes listening to these talks. I think that what we said, since we're in the Wild West right now, if we bake into our processes like a percentage, like let's say 1% of the AI budget on a project is dedicated to an effective and vetted AI for good effort that counterbalances and actually makes that project a net good project, you know, because it's going to be used. So how do we balance? How do we even overbalance it? Like forget net neutral. Let's like climate positive.
I absolutely love that.
I love that.
It seems like there's a new initiative coming. I think also let's not forget that obviously you can choose providers, right? I mean, as we've seen with data centers, you can actually choose a data center that is powered 100% by renewable energy. I know that right now it's tough because a lot of these big tech companies are trying to catch up with it, but obviously that's also a key. So I'm looking forward to seeing that initiative, hopefully next year in Cannes. So our last speaker, Sherri, I'm really looking forward to talk to you because I sat in your chair about 5 years ago judging the Sustainable Development Goal Lions. For those who haven't ever judged in Cannes, even though we are Cannes, you're locked into a room for a very long time discussing with some amazing peers. So obviously the shortlist was out this morning. We won't really know the winners. I'll probably try and see if I can get a little bit out of you. I know I can't, but probably still try. But from sort of the judging and how much you can reveal right now, how much of And focusing on environment, because we talk about nature here today. So what did you see of sort of environmental trends? What were some of the topics that was being covered? And even if you can maybe reveal some of the conversations that might be going on in the judging room in terms of some of these environmental challenges.
Thank you for trying. I will try not to say anything that cannot be revealed. But let me say to start with that this is my first experience at Cannes Lions, and how inspiring it is to me to see how much energy and thought is going into this, and sincere energy and thought. I mean, we have some fantastic examples of campaigns here. I saw many hundreds of other campaigns that also really do speak to the issues that we're up against today, which are very serious issues, and also knowing that you're also looking at the supply chain and the production side of things, thinking about how we can do responsible AI, use AI for good. I think all of those are the right questions to be asking, and so it's been very inspiring for me. And you're right, I was locked in a room for hours and hours with a fantastic group of very diverse people with very different points of view on all of this. And some of the things that we saw, definitely AI is one of the themes. I think that there's a trend to be using more, but it's really about using it in the right way. Does it make sense, or is it just, a gratuitous add-on, or are we using AI for good? And some of the great examples of that are, for example, taking data from nature. Mother Nature has a lot of data. How do we get data from trees or from water? And how do we use that in order to improve things? And what that really comes down to is these really strong partnerships, like in your campaign, that you see between the art, the creative industry, as well as science and the specialists and brands, obviously, but in a very authentic and sincere way. And that's usually when you see amazing success, and something can actually be a game changer. So I think that using tech responsibly and within partnerships is a very important and strong theme that we've seen. And the other part of it is that we've seen storytelling, just those very analog, human-based, inspiring stories that make a real impact on people's lives. I think that if we can actually make a difference in an individual's life or tell the story of an individual, that's really big as well. So that continues to work. That's classic storytelling, but I still think that there's definitely a place for that. And it evokes an emotional reaction in people, and that's how we inspire them to take action. And really what we need now, facing this crisis that we're in, is for people to act. It's not enough just to talk about it or to study it. We actually need people to take actions at scale. So the advertising industry, the creative industry is a huge industry. So if in addition to moving the needle on putting out creative ideas that get people to feel and understand the issues and be inspired to take action, you're also working on it from an industrial standpoint, I think that that's very inspiring and gives me hope.
Some really, really good points. And I think for those who don't know really about that much about the Sustainable Development Goals jury, it's a little bit of a different jury compared to most other juries in Cannes, because it is actually, to the point that Peter had, it is a much more multidisciplinary jury. So you will have people from the creative industry, from the profit industry, broad sectors represented there, which often sparks some pretty interesting conversations. But I think you're touching on something, and we talked about this earlier here as well, this idea about the role of the creative industry. So how do you see partnerships with the creative industry can sort of accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals?
I really do think in inspiring people to action, getting them to understand the issues and then to actually act on them. But at scale, right? At the UN, we communicate about these issues, but we're an institution and we're not as good as you are about creating these amazing stories and pushing it out into the world in such a variety of markets and languages and target audiences. You're much better at that than we are. So working together, I really think makes a huge difference. And as I say, there's real urgency now. We have 5 years to go with the SDGs. They're supposed to be achieved by 2030. It's not a scoop to say they will not be. We're about 17% of the way there, 17 goals, 17% of the way there. And using the force of this creative industry to really accelerate things, I think is important. Just to make a point about that, I've heard a lot about sustainability fatigue. Right? We only have 5 years to go, so let's just move on and do something else. But in 2030, those issues will still be there. They're the same issues. We might not call them the SDGs anymore, but the problems are the same, and the solutions are too. And we know what the solutions are. So really continuing to maintain this momentum of working on that together, I think, is extremely important.
And I think that together is like the one word that comes out from this discussion. It's only together, you know, as industry, as individual, as, you know, citizens, that we will, you know, help me there.
Succeed, yeah.
Thank you.
You know, delivering the last 30%. You know, we're not really there. Yeah, exactly. Together, we demonstrated now,
yes,
right? Finishing
exactly.
each other's sentences on day 4. It's getting better. We have one very last quick sort of around the table question we want to ask you guys. Because one thing is our conversation here, but I really want, also to your point, leave people with something actionable here. Should you just have one, and we just do just around and start around, but just one sort of key thing. I know you touched on different things here, novelty, etc., but one key thing, people listening here that want to excel in protecting nature and my dear island of Bornholm with no fish left.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is we have to be more specific about issues. When we're talking about environmental issues, often it's like very vague, like marine pollution. It's too big, you know. And what people have in mind is just throwing plastic bottle in the sea. You know, we have to address specific pain points, specific problems. Like I think in both cases, they addressed a different one, we addressed a different one. Then we go each one by one with these problems and do our best to solve these. I mean, we can't only like, and this is true for everything about environmental issues. And marine pollution is such a big world, but there are so many things to solve about it, and we can do a lot about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we need to get past awareness on a lot of fronts. And get to actionable ideas. The way to get there is, I think, through partnerships. There's so many people doing actual science, actual scientists who are doing amazing things. I think the creative industry has a role to play in making sustainability culturally relevant again and helping a lot of these scientists into getting eyes on it and driving people to action. And then there's a personal one. I think there's an amazing book. It's called Moral Ambition from Rutger Bregman. And a lot of the times we think that we can't make a difference because the world is huge and we need a lot of people to make a big difference. But when you look at history, all big changes were made by a small group of dedicated and committed people. I think it's good to keep that in mind. Like, I think a small group of people who are committed can make a big difference. So I think, yeah, we have to start like believing that again, I think.
Agreed.
I would say, you know, on a very sort of general level, embracing and integrating mindfulness and compassion in all your choices and decisions, both in your life and in your work. You know, eliminate plastic, single-use plastic, especially, and eat more plants, less meat. You know, these kinds of things. And then on a more practical level, tap Green the Bid. It's a wealth of resources and tools, and reach out to Good Planet Innovation, because we are also always just an open door. We're all about impact and helping elevate all of us to better practices and a better world.
Amazing, yeah.
So I have actually something very specific to ask. One of the things that is threatening progress on absolutely all of this is greenwashing. And the role that the creative industry has to play in that is absolutely huge. We really need you to ask for accountability and transparency in the entire ad tech supply chain, because it's damaging to brands, it's damaging to what we want to achieve through the SDGs and in climate action. And so anything that is a threat to information integrity undermines trust in the science, in all of the work that we do, in the brands that you represent. And so I think that that's something that I would really ask everybody in this industry to focus on.
Amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. This was also something that Jake Dobbins talked about yesterday at Urban House for Good. He's from the Conscious Advertising Network. So misinformation, a key thing. Obviously, what's near and dear to you, very, very important. Turning attention into partnerships and thinking about that. And maybe actually beginning with that individual compassion for creating change. I really wholeheartedly enjoyed this conversation. I think there's a lot of very, very easy takeaways that you guys can apply in your creativity, in your much more solution-based approach. And I think this is about being together and solving this through collaboration.
Yeah, and step by step. Step by step.
And lastly, we do have the ACT tribute honoring amazing individuals and great campaigns that have created change over the last year that we're going to celebrate tonight at 5 o'clock. I'm really looking forward to seeing the winners and celebrating the change makers. But first and foremost, thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedules, and best of luck with maybe winning. And I'm probably trying to tweak more information out of you a little bit later, maybe Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.